How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, now that the 4 Elite 8 matchups are finished, we have now reached the Final Four round, and of course, with the Final Four being played on Saturday, with this episode, with this preview, I plan on providing the context as to how all of these teams got here, and what has been a crazy year for college basketball because, of course, it was impacted by the coronavirus. Of course, there were less fans, which, of course, would impact recruiting and would impact their schedules. There were a lot of games that were canceled throughout this year. And out of the 4 teams in this, all 4 of these teams have gone through incredible journeys to get here. One of the teams, Gonzaga, is undefeated. UCLA they've made it here from the play-in game to even to make it to the round of 64, and they've made it all the way to the Final Four. So with this, I'm gonna go through both of these matchups and explain how both of these teams got here, just to provide the context as to how we got to this very moment. So, on Saturday, April 3rd, there will be both matchups for the Final Four will be played, because on Friday the women's matches will be played. At 5:14, it'll be the first matchup on TBS between Baylor, who would go on to win the South region, the 1 seed from the South region, and they will face off against 2 seed Houston, who came out of the Midwest region. So just to give a little bit of background, starting with Baylor would, of course, make it here after they beat 16th seed Hartford in the very first round. They beat them 79-55 incredibly convincingly to make it to the next round. In the second round, they would face off against 9 seed Wisconsin after they beat North Carolina by 23. In the second round, Baylor would end up beating Wisconsin 76-63 very convincingly to make it through the first weekend and make it up to this weekend. And because I don't have the games listed here, I have them listed in the earlier episode. So if you want to see how those matchups, how they played out, I would recommend you click on one of the earlier videos. But once Baylor made it into the Sweet 16 weekend, their first matchup was against 5 seed Villanova, and this was after Villanova beat 13 seed North Texas. Once they made it to this game, they would end up beating them 62-51 after they were trailing by 7 in the first half. They would end up outscoring Villanova by 18 points in the second half, led by their guard Adam Flagler. And after beating Villanova, they would have to face off in the Elite 8 against Arkansas, who came off of their 2-point win against Oral Roberts. And when they faced off against Arkansas on Monday, they would end up beating the Razorbacks 81-72. The big difference coming in the first half, where they outscored Arkansas 46-38. They were, of course, led by their guard Maceo Teague, who had 22 points, 5 rebounds, and a couple of blocks. And that would be how Baylor would end up winning the South region, to where they would end up in the Final Four. And of course, now they will face off against 2 seed Houston, who came out of the South region. Just to give a little bit of context as to how Houston got here, Houston would end up winning their first seed. Or this is also the bracket where Illinois was the number 1 seed. In the first round, they would end up beating Cleveland State 87-56, convincingly. They beat them by 29 points to make it to the next round. In the next round, they would face off against 10 seed Rutgers after Rutgers barely beat Clemson. And in this matchup, they would barely beat Rutgers 69-60. Rutgers had an opportunity to win the game, but of course, Houston would hold it down defensively and just sneak through into the second weekend of play once they made it to the first weekend. Once they made it to the Sweet 16, they would have to face off against 11 seed Syracuse. In this matchup, they would end up beating Syracuse 62-46, led by their forward, Justin Gorham. They would outscore Syracuse by 10 points in the first half and 16 in the second. Convincingly, they held Buddy Boeheim to 12 points. That's where they advanced to the Elite 8, where they would face off against 12 seed Oregon State. 12 seed Oregon State, of course, had made it there after beating Loyola Chicago, the team that beat Illinois. So in this matchup, Houston would end up winning this one 67-61. They outscored Oregon State by 17 on Monday. They doubled their output in the first half. In the second half, Oregon State outscored them by 11, but it wouldn't be enough, as Houston, led by DeJon Jarreau, would finish with 10, or They would finish with a 6-point win. DeJon Jarreau would finish with 10 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists to help just to help wheel Houston to be the second Texas team to advance to the Final Four, and this will be an all Texas Final Four matchup, as this matchup will be on at 5. This matchup will be on CBS at 5:14, and the first winner of that will, of course, advance to the national championship game. Now I take you to the other side of the bracket, where you have the Cinderella team versus the absolute favorite. You have first you have the at 8:34, you will have the winner of the West Region 1 seed Gonzaga against the winner of the East Region 11 seed UCLA face off. Looking at how both teams got here, just to lead off. First seed Gonzaga made it here after, of course, they would go undefeated throughout their season, and they would end up winning the West Coast Conference bracket. So they came into the tournament as the overall number 1 seed, and they had not lost a game coming in. In their first game, they would have to play against 16 seed Norfolk State, who had to play in to make it into this round. They beat Norfolk State by 43 points. So they would face off against Oklahoma in the second round. And in the second round, even though Oklahoma had to play as hard as they could, they just couldn't overcome Gonzaga, as Gonzaga just dominated them through both halves. They won 87-71 to make it through the first weekend of play. Coming into the Sweet 16, they would have to face off against 5 seed Creighton. And in this matchup, they would be Creighton 83-65. They outscored Creighton by 10 points in the first half and 8 in the second, as Andrew Nembhard would be the top performer for Gonzaga. He had 17 points and 8 assists. And following the Sweet 16 matchup, they would have to face off in the West Region Final against 6 seed USC, who of course had gotten there by dominating every team that they had played. This is the team that beat 3rd seed Kansas by about 30 points. Then they beat 7 seed Oregon by about 14. So they came in against Gonzaga. It was a well-anticipated matchup. And then Gonzaga would outscore USC by 19 points in the first half yesterday, led by their freshman guard, Jalen Suggs, who had 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists. As, of course, it was a matchup between two of the top NBA draft prospects, as Evan Mobley on the other side was also able to put up some pretty good numbers for USC. But in this one, it will be Gonzaga that advanced. Thus far, they are 30-0, and if they win 2 more games, they can be one of the very few teams in college basketball history to finish the season undefeated. And then following that, they're going to face off against 11 seed UCLA, who ended up winning the East region after they had to play in the play-in game to make it into the first round. So, of course, this is the region where Michigan would be the number 1 seed. First, UCLA would have to beat Michigan State in the first game. They beat them 86-80 off of some late game heroics from Jaime Jaquez to make it into the round of 64. Once they made it to the round of 64, they'd have to face off against 6 seed BYU, where they ended up beating them 73-62. In the second round, UCLA would have to face off against 14 seed Abilene Christian after they upset Texas. In the second round, UCLA would end up beating Abilene Christian 67-47 to make it out the first weekend. So entering the Sweet 16, they'd have to face off against 2 seed Alabama. In this matchup, they would end up upsetting Alabama in overtime, in a game that really shouldn't have gone to overtime due to some free throw shooting, but thanks to some March Madness luck, UCLA was able to advance to overtime, where they just destroyed Alabama. They outscored them 23-13, led by Jaime Jaquez Jr., 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists on the day. So with this win, UCLA would advance to the Elite 8, and in the Elite 8, they'd face off against 1 seed Michigan, and Michigan trying to be the third 1 seed to advance to the Final Four. They would fall short. They ended up getting outscored by 4 in the first half by UCLA, and then they tried to come back in the second half. It just wouldn't be enough. UCLA, led by their guard Johnny Juzang, would pull off the 51-49 win. Michigan actually had a chance to win the game. They had a chance to even tie the game. They had 2-3 different shots, but then UCLA would come up with the rebound, and then they would get fouled and then go up by another point. And with this 2-point win, they will advance to face off against the winner of the West region, 1 seed Gonzaga. So we get to the point where if UCLA wins this game, they'll probably be one of the greatest Cinderella stories of all time. And if Gonzaga wins, it would just go on to prove that they were probably one of the most dominant college teams to ever exist. So those are the storylines that are coming into Saturday's games. And the second matchup between Gonzaga and UCLA will be at 8:34. And once these two games are decided, I will come to you with another episode for an NCAA men's basketball championship preview. But in the meantime, I want to thank you once again for listening to all 10 minutes of my piece. I hope all is well. Today is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims. I want to thank everyone for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying the March Madness all of March. Peace out, and I'll catch you Sunday once all these games are finished on Saturday. Peace.